Good afternoon from New York City and welcome. My name is Regina. I am the coordinator of the Americas Dialogue in Education Policy. It is an initiative at the Institute of Latin American Studies, or ILAS, at Columbia University. On behalf of ILAS, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second edition of this dialogue called Women Leaders in Latin American Higher Education. This conference is divided into two panels, one today and one tomorrow at the same time. The topic of today's panel is Women in Higher Education, Policy, Funding, and Academic Priorities. Before we get started, I would like to thank the panelists for honoring us with their presence today, as well as their team in their institutions to make this joint effort possible. On the side of Columbia University, I would like to thank the Latinx and Latin American Faculty Working Group at Teachers College for their sponsorship and contributions to the event, as well as to Denise Recinos and Marcela Winter for all their help in the organization of this conference. Last, I would like to thank the audience for being here today, of course. As the event moves forward, please feel free to type your questions using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will retrieve them after the presentations. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to ILAS's YouTube and may be shared as well through its different communications channels. Now, without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to the chair and discussant of the panel, Dr. Regina Cortina. Regina Cortina is Professor of Education in the Department of International and Transcultural Studies at Teachers College, Columbia University. From 2018 to 2019, she was president of the Comparative and International Education Society, CIES, which is the leading scholarly association devoted to the study of education across societies and regions around the globe. Her presidential address, The Passion for What is Possible in Comparative and International Education, was published in the Comparative Education Review in November 2019. Professor Cortina's teaching and publications are advancing the field by focusing on decolonial theories in comparative education. Two of her most recent articles were published in 2019 and 2020 in Compare, a journal of comparative and international education. Professor Cortina's latest book, Indigenous Education Policy, Equity, and Intercultural Understanding in Latin America, appeared in 2017. Professor Cortina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Regina, for the introduction and for all your work in organizing the event. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this panel on women's leaders in Latin American higher education. The purpose of our conversation today is to learn from our panelists about the unique challenges of instituting policies for women advancement in higher education. Each of our panelists, a prominent women leader, will discuss the challenges they confront as administrators to forward the goal of gender equity through education. So our first panelist is Claudia De Lima. She's rector of the University of Ouro Preto in Brazil. And Claudia's presentation is Gender in Federal Higher Education Institutions in Brazil, the case of the Federal University of Ouro Preto. Professor of the School of Nutrition at the Federal University, she holds a PhD on environmental impact assessment on health from University College of Wales. Dr. Lima has had several positions in the university, director of the School of Nutrition and rector. Recently, she was re-elected as rector until 2025. Her main area of interest are nutrition, food consumption, the health of workers, and the social program Bolsa Familia. Thank you very much, Dr. Lima, and please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in this conference. I would like to greet all speakers, Paula and Diana, and the audience. My subject here is gender in Brazilian university. a case at the UFOP. I'm so sorry, I'm going to speak in Portuguese, but you can follow me by slides. Next, please. Aqui nós podemos ver a porcentagem de universidades por região no Brasil. O que a gente observa aqui que na região sudeste, onde eu estou, né, a Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto, nós temos a maior concentração de universidades federais, 31%. Sendo que destas universidades na região sudeste, que é a região mais desenvolvida do país, nós temos 11 universidades no estado de Minas Gerais, 11 universidades públicas federais estão aqui no estado de Minas Gerais. Neste gráfico, nesse gráfico de pizza, nós podemos observar que in Southeast, keep the same number, né, 4 rectors in the university. Here in North, 3 in Northeast, 1 in Central West, and 2 in Southeast. Then we have 19% of the universities in Brazil are rectors. I think that is unbelievable. Only 19% of the university has a rector human. Next, please. Nós temos no Brasil uma Associação Nacional de Diretores de federal, uma Associação Nacional de Reitores e Reitoras, que fica em Brasília. E esta entidade nacional, ela foi criada em 1989. E nós tivemos como uma reitora mulher da Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, a professora Vanessa, como a primeira presidente desta fundação. Depois, em 31 anos de existência desta associação, 63 mulheres, né, foram presidentes, não, desculpa, 63 mulheres, né, foram reitoras das universidades, mas somente em 31 anos nós tivemos 63 reitoras, e somente 5 dessas reitoras foram presidentes dessa associação. Então, nós podemos ver a dificuldade da questão de gênero, não só dentro das universidades e entre as universidades, mas também na Associação Nacional dos Reitores e Reitoras. Próximo. Next, please. Here is... Aqui é a Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I speak English, sometimes I speak in Portuguese. A Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto foi criada em 1969 pela união de 2 escolas centenárias. A Escola de Farmácia, 1839, que foi criada, e a Escola de Minas, em 1876. Então, a Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto foi criada em 1969 pela junção dessas 2 escolas isoladas. Nós temos 55 cursos de graduação, 33 cursos de mestrado, 16 de doutorado, 11.867 alunos de graduação, 2.069 alunos de pós, 909 docentes, professores, 721 técnicos administrativos em educação. Next.
Slow.
Minas Gerais, this is a state of Minas Gerais. Nós temos o campus, 3 campos, sendo um campus na cidade de Ouro Preto, que é o maior, um outro na cidade de Mariana e um outro na cidade de João Molevade. Nós temos também 36 polos de educação à distância, tanto no estado de Minas Gerais, como no Espírito Santo e também na Bahia. Next. Aqui nós podemos observar que o número de alunos matriculados no campus de Ouro Preto é maior em relação aos outros campos. A parte cinza são alunos matriculados em João Molevade. Essa cor aqui, ocre, mais ou menos, são alunos matriculados em Mariana, e a parte amarela são os nossos alunos de cursos à distância. Aqui, nós temos a relação de alunos matriculados, homens e mulheres, né? Em 2018, nós podemos ver que nós tivemos muito mais matrículas do sexo feminino em relação ao sexo masculino. Em 2019, nós também mantemos maior número de alunos de alunas do sexo feminino do que alunos do sexo masculino. Agora, em 2020, nós tivemos uma pequena diminuição na matrícula de alunas do sexo feminino em relação ao sexo masculino. Existe a possibilidade, que ainda está sendo estudada, que essa diminuição de matrículas de alunas nas universidades brasileiras está relacionado com a pandemia da Covid-19, que também tem outros fatores que podem estar associados com a pandemia, como a questão da crise econômica no país, que está muito grande. São as mulheres, geralmente, elas são responsáveis principalmente para o cuidado de idosos e também das crianças, e com isso as estudantes costumam deixar a universidade para cuidar do domicílio ou mesmo de crianças e idosos. Aqui também segue o número de cursos de graduação que nós temos, permanecendo em 2020 55 cursos de graduação. O próximo, por favor. Em relação aos servidores docentes e técnicos administrativos em educação, nós temos aqui que na área administrativa, nós temos 43% do sexo feminino, enquanto nós temos 57% dos técnicos administrativos do sexo masculino, ou seja, na contratação da UFOP existe o maior número de contratação de homens do que de mulheres. E, em relação aos professores, também, nós observamos uma diferença ainda bem maior. Nós temos somente 40% das nossas docentes mulheres e 60% dos nossos docentes homens. Isso mostra uma diferença muito grande também na contratação de professores da Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto. Próximo. Em relação à administração superior, que nós chamamos de posições de liderança, que me inclui, inclusive, como reitor e o vice-reitor, nós temos 48% das mulheres que estão em posições de liderança na universidade, e nós temos 52 homens em posição de liderança aqui na UFOP. Porém, a gente também observa uma certa diferença entre... há pouco estava 50-50, mas houve uma saída, ocorreu uma saída de uma pró-reitora e entrou um pró-reitor, e esta diferença alterou para maior número de homens na liderança, na posição de liderança na UFOP. Próximo. Na Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto, nós temos vários projetos. Dentre eles, nós temos o Andorinhas, que é um projeto que é um grupo de professores, de técnicos administrativos em educação, estudantes, feministas, pesquisadoras e mães, de vários setores da UFOP. E elas discutem todas as questões relacionadas em relação à mulher e também à maternidade. Existe um outro grupo, Manu Grupo, que também trabalha a questão da maternidade e a universidade. Elas dão o suporte para aquelas alunas que estão entrando na universidade ou que já estão na universidade, no sentido de acolhimento para essas mães, né, e mulheres. E nós temos também as mulheres, né, na ciência. É uma forma de dar oportunidade para que as mulheres, as meninas, as estudantes tenham a chance de conhecer os trabalhos das cientistas, professoras mulheres e suas pesquisas no sentido de incentivar o envolvimento com a ciência, porque ainda nós temos menos mulheres no Brasil fazendo ciência em relação aos homens. Próximo. Aqui nós temos vários projetos, e um que eu chamo a atenção é este de Female Ombudsman, porque este é a segunda universidade do Brasil que criou essa ouvidoria feminina, justamente para tentar acolher as mulheres que sofrem de qualquer tipo de violência. E nós temos esses vários outros programas que eu não vou falar aqui, projetos que eu não vou citar. Próximo. Aqui também nós temos vários outros projetos em andamento, alguns já consolidados, outros ainda iniciando, né? E o Flor de Anaí é um projeto que trabalha com as mulheres lutadoras, né, socialmente lutadoras, porque elas trabalham com a questão, abordam a questão do trabalho, a questão da saúde física, saúde mental, a importância da mulher na política. É um projeto de grande relevância. Este Feminist Investigation Nucleus Ninféias é na área de artes cênicas, que trabalha a questão de gênero com a questão da mulher através das expressões corporais e também através do teatro. E esses outros, né? Nós temos, são muitos. Next, please. Aqui também nós temos outros, né? Outros projetos. Eu vou chamar aqui a atenção para o dedo de prosa, com gestantes, né, que são atendidas pelo Sistema Único de Saúde, saúde pública, aqui em Ouro Preto e região, e se aborda todas as questões da gravidez, né, e pós-gravidez. Então, é uma proposta tanto do aporte nutricional, como também do aporte médico, né, no período da gravidez e pós-gravidez. No Sistema Único de Saúde, que, em geral, atende mais pessoas de vulnerabilidade socioeconômica. Next. E o grupo Andorinhas, Network Proposals, é um grupo também próximo. Andorinhas tem uma proposta que a primeira delas é institucionalizar esse grupo Andorinhas, essa rede Andorinhas, no organograma da universidade ligado à reitoria. E existem políticas, né, em relação à maternidade, também a representação de gênero. E o que elas chamam bastante atenção é que a gente deveria ter, por exemplo, um score diferenciado para avaliar a questão da produtividade científica, extensionista, ou mesmo de ensino, em relação aos homens pesquisadores, e também elas acreditam que nós devemos ter editais com cotas específicas para mulheres e negras, gestantes, ou mães, né? Em outras áreas aqui da universidade, como no caso da iniciação científica, de pesquisa, de publicação em artigos científicos, na extensão e também na monitoria. Nós, no Brasil, temos uma carreira docente e a gente, a cada 2 anos, nós somos avaliados e temos um acréscimo monetário. E essa progressão é de acordo com... Você ganha ou não de acordo com a sua produção. E, muitas vezes, as mulheres têm que sair das suas carreiras de pesquisadoras ou têm dificuldades de publicação por causa da maternidade e outras questões, e muitas vezes não conseguem progredir. Então, elas pedem que essa progressão seja avaliada de uma forma diferente, a pontuar e considerar essas questões que eu falei para a progressão das mulheres pesquisadoras. Existem muitas mulheres, mães, né, que saem por diversos motivos e razões dos programas de pós-graduação, né? E elas pedem que nós devemos avaliar a questão de recebê-las novamente no programa, analisando, logicamente, toda a situação do qual ela foi desligada. Isso também é uma solicitação dessa rede Andorinhas. Também fazer uma política de cotas para mulheres estudantes, tanto para concorrer às vagas do mestrado e do doutorado, e a tendência pública, né, de também trabalhar com professores e técnicos administrativos na área de concurso. Por exemplo, nós observamos que os concursos estão entrando mais homens professores e mais homens técnicos administrativos. Então, elas solicitam que a gente crie algum critério para que possa entrar mais mulheres, ou pelo menos igual em número, né, mulheres e homens. Na Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto, nós temos uma política de permanência dos alunos de vulnerabilidade social. E a gente dá alimentação, a gente dá casa para morar, nós temos um acompanhamento do desenvolvimento do aluno para ele ganhar uma bolsa, né, para ele ter um rendimento superior, e também uma política de inclusão digital, que muitos desses alunos de vulnerabilidade socioeconômica, que é um grande número na nossa universidade, eles muitas vezes não têm, e aí pede para as mulheres, elas não têm, por exemplo, um computador, elas não têm condições, por exemplo, nessa pandemia, de ter no domicílio um espaço adequado para estudo, e elas também, às vezes, não têm internet. Então, daí a nossa preocupação em fazer uma política para que garanta também para as estudantes mães. E também usar pelo menos 1/3, né? Para as mulheres afro-brasileiras, negras e mulheres, nos comitês que vão passar por critério de seleção ou de escolha, como, por exemplo, para a banca de mestrado, doutorado, entre outros. Próximo. As políticas, né, elas solicitam elas têm solicitado a entrada de crianças acompanhadas pelas mães ou cuidadores no restaurante universitário aqui da UFOP, a criação de um setor que receba as mulheres trabalhadoras e estudantes para uma atenção maior para a saúde física e mental, e também elas querem cuidado psicológico, né, para as trabalhadoras, né, mulheres, focando principalmente os técnicos e os professores, e as técnicas e as professoras, e que tem uma organização anual do simpósio sobre o tema gênero, né, equidade de gênero aqui na UFOP, maternidade. Inclusive, este ano terá um. A promoção também de leituras relacionadas à questão do abuso sexual e moral na universidade, ligado, inclusive, à ouvidoria feminina, e também a discussão de como as trabalhadoras, né, grávidas retornarão para as atividades presenciais durante a Covid-19. Próximo.
Já ficamos para as conclusões.
Ok. Você pode colocar no último. Nós temos aqui várias resoluções que já são implantadas. Próximo. Aqui também outras indicações de alterações das resoluções para melhorar a assistência à mulher. Próximo. Aqui também são propostas também que dependem de recursos financeiros, então isso tem que ser discutido de uma forma bastante cuidadosa. Próximo. Aqui nós não podemos falar que a meritocracia é a mesma coisa para homens e para mulheres. Aqui no Brasil, nós sabemos que as mulheres trabalham 3 vezes mais dentro de casa do que os homens. Então, pela meritocracia, as mulheres sempre perdem, porque elas têm que cuidar não só da casa, como também dos filhos. Essa ilustração mostra que não é justo a questão da meritocracia em relação a gênero no Brasil. Próximo. Aqui é a galeria de ex-reitores da Universidade Federal de Ouro Preto. Na festa de 50 anos da universidade, esses ex-reitores compareceram. E a próxima foto nessa galeria será da primeira mulher, que sou eu, a fazer parte dessa galeria de fotos de ex-reitoras. E que isso, para mim, é um grande orgulho. Próximo. Thank you. Obrigada.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talk. So now we're going to have our next panelist. I would like to introduce Paola Rosaro. She's Dean of the Faculty of Education at Diego Portales University in Santiago de Chile. The title of her presentation is Preparing Teachers in Latin America, the Case of Chile. Paula is Dean of the School of Education. She holds a master's degree in International Comparative Education from Stanford University and a doctoral degree in Administration, Planning, and Social Policy from Harvard University. Her prior experience includes working for UNESCO, Bureau of Education for Latin American and the Caribbean in Santiago de Chile, and serving as a consultant from several non-governmental organizations in Brazil. Dr. Louzano has conducted research on teacher education and professional development, education policies, and inequality in Brazil and Latin America. Thank you for joining us, Paula.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you very much to ILAS for the invitation to be here this afternoon, and thank you for all the people that are watching us. I'm gonna share my presentation. And as Regina said, I'm gonna be talking about teacher education in Latin America. Before I start, I would like to thank Regina and Ilas also for the dialogues in comparative education. I think the work, Regina, you guys have done are very important for our region, because not only you provide and stimulate a dialogue between North and South, but you foster the participation of Latin American women, and not always, but this time, to speak with our voices about our region. And I think that has a very important value in the context of the North, as you know better than anyone, because this is the topic of your research. So thank you so much for this conference that you are organizing and for inviting me, of course. So I will be talking about Chile, but always as examples of what I'm gonna be talking about. Basically, I will be talking about the teacher as a professor, teaching as a profession, and what does it take to improve our profession in Latin America. So I think, and Marcia talked a little bit about it. I think everybody knows, and that's not only in Latin America, the teaching is a feminine profession. That when we look at data, we see that women are majority, both in pre-primary, primary, and secondary education teaching force in Latin America. In some countries, sometimes secondary education has a more balance or even towards men, but that's not the case in Latin America. However, when we look at the proportion of men that became principal, in comparison to the number of men that we have in the teaching force, they are majority. Just like what Marcia said about Cláudia, perdão, sorry. Cláudia said about university in Brazil. In higher education, like Cláudia also showed, in the case of her university, we have more male professors than female professors, right? So we have a change from pre-primary education to higher education in terms of who are teaching, right? From more female to male. And when we look at the rank within the profession or faculty members within university, it's even more male oriented. When we look at full professors, they tend to be, even in a school of education like mine, where we have much more women as in the faculty, we have much more men as full professors within this faculty. And of course, as Cláudia also pointed out, very fewer females in management positions, not only rectors and presidents, but now also dean, provosts, and etc. So the more you go up the ladder in education as in teaching, the more this profession become less feminine and more masculine. So given this paradox that we have within the teaching profession, what does it mean to prepare teachers in this context? And that's what I'm going to be talking about. So the point here is how much of this glass ceiling effect, which Cláudia portrayed as the race that is unequal, right, between men and women, that we could call a glass ceiling effect, meaning we have a big numbers of people in the teaching profession. Even at university level, we still have, as Cláudia pointed out, we have basically 50-50. But when we look at the ladder within the university or the power within the university, we realize that there is definitely a glass ceiling effect. And how much this glass ceiling effect interact with status within the profession, salary, and power, right, within our teaching profession. And so I'm gonna analyze that in terms of the attraction to be a teacher, the compensation related to being teachers, and the preparation that our profession requires for someone to become a teacher, and the selection that we have for someone to be part of our profession. And I'm going to do that because I think somehow there is a relationship with gender that has been understudied in terms of the teaching profession, even though has been studied a lot in other specific professions or in general, right? what the public policy says about attraction, income, and compensation in teaching is that both are intertwined. The more we compensate, the better the salary, the better the labor conditions, the more attractive will be a profession. And it seems very obvious, right? But when we look at the Chilean experience, where there was a big increase in the salary and labor conditions of teachers compared to what it was before, we see that it's not simple to reverse the trend of the lower attraction within the teaching profession, despite the increase in the salary. I'm talking specifically about school teachers rather than university teachers. Another topic that is key to think about the teaching profession is the type of preparation that we teachers have. So when we look at this, this trend in Latin America, we see that not long ago, we made a decision, or most of the countries did, and some of the countries who didn't are doing right now, changing the way we train teachers and the place we train teachers from normal schools, which were secondary level schools, to universities, to higher education. And this was an important fight, I would say, of educators, because it was seen as an increase in status to change the preparation of teachers from secondary level, where you prepare more of technicians, to higher education levels. However, within universities, and I'm sure Cláudia and Regina would agree with me, schools of education have a lower status within the other faculties, the other schools within the university. So it's not considered in most of the countries in Latin America, and I would say even in the US, at the same level as other important schools of education. And one can argue part of this has to do with the gender of the faculty and the students. This change from normal schools to universities, that I don't ignore that there was change in status, right? And I'm saying that this status within the university was not observed as much as it was outside. And this power struggle from schools of education, to have more power and more status within university made a shift in the type of curriculum that we had in normal schools to universities, increasing what was known as higher sciences, higher knowledge that belongs to other fields of education, or even hard disciplines like math or language, the content that we have to teach. And there was a decrease in the knowledge from the field and from schooling, because that knowledge was seen as of lower level, right? Or lower status. And this shift, even though the idea was to compare or to level education and teachers to social science or psychologists within the preparation, made it less clear what was the knowledge base of our profession. What makes us different from a sociologist? What makes us different from a mathematician? What makes us a profession, right? And I think this is important when we think about medical schools or even law schools. You either do that by regulating a lot the profession and valuing a lot the field. That's what they do in medicine. You cannot have, in many countries in Latin America and in the world, a school of medicine without a hospital. The idea that those things are intertwined are very clear. In the case of law, even though you don't regulate the training of lawyers, you regulate who can become a lawyer. So the Corporation of Lawyers create a test that has different names in different countries, but they decide, the profession decide who can be a lawyer, who cannot be a lawyer. That's not the case in our profession. But what the Chilean experience shows is that the more you center the preparations of teachers on practice, which is the trend in Chile since the reform of teacher education, the more you increase the knowledge from the field in the teacher preparation curriculum. The more women you tend to have teaching in a school of education that are closer to the field of education, to the schooling, because those are majority of the people. They are managing schools, they are working on schools, and they're teaching on schools. And I think another point that we learn from other professions within the university, either medical schools or law schools, and that in order to have quality, you have to rely on the state or in the profession, the organized profession, and not in the market. Thinking like the market will solve the problem of quality. Important professions don't rely on the market at all. And why should we do that as teachers? And if you think how key our profession is, that would be kind of crazy, right? To think about it. In terms of selection of teachers, when we talk about selection, we are thinking of the quality of the people that want to become a teacher, of the intake, the people that come to university to become a teacher, and the idea that the more selective a profession, the more attractive this profession is, right? And so what we have in Latin America is a profession that is not selective. We don't select in order to become a teacher. And as I said, not only we don't select, meaning contributing to the attractiveness of the profession and contributing to make it harder to prepare those who decide to become a teacher, right? So this puts up more pressure in the schools of education. The very same schools, they're being pressured inside the university to have more status among the group of their peers and other schools. And because of that, getting further and further away from the knowledge of the field. So this pressure is somehow responsible for the decreasing quality of the preparation of teachers in terms of the knowledge base of teaching. I'm not saying they're not learning anything. What I'm saying, we are not strengthening an important type of knowledge, which is the knowledge of practice, the knowledge that belongs to the practitioners. That type of knowledge that is very valued by professions like medicine, and it's also very valued by professions like law. If that was not the case, they wouldn't do a test that they prepare, the profession prepare, an exam where they believe that specific knowledge is important in order to become part of a profession. So it's a corporation in a very positive way, working together, right, in the name of our profession. And that's exactly what we don't have in our region. Although Chile, I think, made a decision to be different, right? And decided to increase drastically, not only the selection of those interested in become a teacher. So today in Chile, if you want to study to be a teacher, you have to be in the top 50% of the distribution of what we call the SAT in Chile, or which is called PSU, or ENEM, what would be the name in Brazil, the end of high school exam. Usually teachers came from the bottom 50, right? So once you decided they have to come to the top 50, of course, you have a more selective entrance, and of course, much less people entering the schools of education. At the same time, they increase a lot of the regulations for a school of education to operate, right? Because if you increase the salary, you increase selectivity, you change the type of curriculum, you center this curriculum on practice. You need to have those future teachers within the schools that operate during the day, studying, practicing to be teachers. That means you don't have night school, you don't have weekend schools, you have full-time programs preparing teachers. But different from what was expected in the policy, we have now in Chile a lack of teachers in the labor market. The idea that you're gonna be attracting more and more people that are considered talented, meaning top 50% of the distribution in the score, didn't hold true as they expected, this shift. So what we have, we are decreasing the number of people that are interested in being a teacher and are in the top 50% of the distribution. We have a lot of people that are under the 50%, but those people do not have a chance to become a teacher. They're excluded because they don't get the scores. So this is causing a lack of teachers that some see as positive, because in the very short run, and this is happening, I would say, for next year, schools are already looking for our students that are graduating at the end of the year in December and offering higher salaries that they were offering last year because they do not have teachers. So not necessarily this is a problem, even though you always worried about the deficit, and I think we should, but in a way, we are adjusting the salary towards supply and demand. What I think it's an important discussion, related to the topic I'm bringing about to you today. And I think the Chilean experience in reforming the teaching profession touches upon the right policy instruments. That should be not a question mark. I'm sure they did touch upon the right policy instruments, meaning compensation, labor conditions of teachers, also regulating and increasing the quality of the teacher preparation programs, and increasing the selectivity of the intake of the people who want to be teachers, and in a way showing to the society that teaching is an important profession. The only other profession that have so many requirements in Chile at this moment is medical schools. So in a way, symbolically means a lot for you to say there are only two professions that I'm gonna regulate so much by the state, and those are the teaching and the medical profession. But why is not fully working as expected, right? Why the results are not what the policymakers were expecting? You think that this policy has more than 5 years in, and the pool of future teachers is only decreasing. And I wonder to what extent is gender and the fact that teaching is such a feminine profession is influencing the results of the teacher policies in Chile. And gender was never part of the discussion in terms of the design of the policy. And I think further research that look at this would be very interesting to pursue. Thank you so much. And I'm willing to listen to the contributions of the other members of the panel and the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. So our next speaker is Ana Gusmas. She's director of the Division for Gender Affairs in the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. The title of her talk is Towards Gender Equality in STEM, a challenge to public policy in Latin America and the Caribbean. Ana is director of the Division of Gender Affairs at the Economic Commission of Latin America. She's a defender of women's rights and gender equality with 30 years of experience in Latin America and the Caribbean. Dr. Güezmes has been a representative of UN Women in Colombia and previously served as the regional director of UN Women in Latin America and the Caribbean. Dr. Güezmes is a public health specialist focusing on community health and international management and cooperation. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you, Regina. This is a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you to the Columbia University, ILAS, and I think that this idea of America's Dialogue in Education Policy Initiative, this is very, very interesting for all of us. And I am happy to share this panel with you, with Dr. Lima and Dr. Louzano. Her last presentation touched especially me because my father and my mother, both of them are secondary teachers. So I agree with many of these thoughts on that. But now we are prepared this presentation. This is a regional overview about the gender equality in STEM and what is happening in the public policy in Latin America and in the Caribbean. Next, please. My presentation has 4 parts, key messages, a little overview about gender inequality in Latin America and in the Caribbean. What is the framework of inequalities? You know, this is the region with most gender inequalities and in general inequalities around the world. The number 3 is why focus on STEM from a gender perspective. And finally, the policy landscape and challenges for the region. And next, please. Okay, you could share then the presentation across the participants. So, but we try to put key information in all the slides. No? So first is ECLAT perspective is gender inequality is historical and structural challenge in Latin America and the Caribbean. This crisis, this COVID crisis, brought about to deepening these inequalities. No, so some example is women are facing increases in unpaid care work burdens, loss of income and jobs. They are overrepresented in situation of poverty and underrepresented in the segments of the labor market that are key for the future. For instance, digital, STEM, okay, and other innovative sector of job. Second is gender inequality in STEM areas and careers persists in spite of important gains in women access to higher education. I think Cláudia and Paula explained very well this in Brazil and in Chile. And STEM careers and skills are key to meet today's multiple and complex challenges. Forever persistent gender gaps and barriers remains for women in these fields. And there has been recent progress in public policies linking gender and STEM, but this is very new, I think, in the last decade, but more needs to be done to advance in tackling structural barriers and implement a comprehensive policy initiative. And finally, the third idea is a post-pandemic recovery requires fostering women's inclusion in high productivity sector, expanding STEM education, not only university education, but also technical education, and address underrepresentation in these fields. No, let me say only a parenthesis that 4 women, 4 of 10 women in Latin America do not have connection to internet or can pay that. So digitalization era, this is a key challenge in the area of education, but also, of course, in the area of economic inclusion for women, because promoting this kind of participation, eliminating the digital gap is key in order not amplify the gender inequality in the future. In the next slide, we present the framework that ECLAC has promoted across the regional multilateral fora. And the idea of the gender inequality has recognized 4 structural challenges, interconnected. So we need to analyze together, first, socioeconomic inequality and the persistence on poverty in the context of exclusionary growth. Second, culture, patriarchal, discriminatory, violent cultural patterns. I think Cláudia refers to that. Intersectionality is very important. It's not only patriarchal patterns, it's also the culture of privilege. No? So race, ethnic, age, all of that is important to analyze. Third, the sexual division of labor force and the unfair social organization of care. This is very clear in this time. And the concentration of power and hierarchical relations in public sphere. No? So we need to analyze all these factors, all these barriers as a comprehensive framework. In the next, we put some examples of situation across Latin America and Caribbean, a higher proportion of women in poverty, lower incomes, increased burdens of unpaid work, horizontal and vertical segregation in educational and career trajectories, and lower participation of women in science, technology, and innovation fields. Siguiente, next. Here we present very quickly the impact of the pandemic in the women's labor force participation. We represent 18-year setbacks in the levels of females labor force participation. So this is an example about the crisis and the impact on women. Next, in this case, we represent segregation. This is the idea that women are in employment with high risk in the context of the crisis, and in general, we select commerce, manufacturing, and tourism with high proportion of women, but with a precarious social protection floor. And on the other hand, the main sector for the sustainability of the life, health, education, and paid domestic work, that we have in general the first line of women on those sectors, no? But we need to put on value all of this situation and segregation, what does mean. No? Of course, as Claudia and Regina said, there are more women, but not making decisions in many countries. No. Next, this is a key issue for us, the unpaid work, and the idea is women spend more than 3 times as much time on unpaid work as men. And countries that, for instance, Chile, no, data that follow the COVID-19 context on participation show that 38% of men reported not having performed these tasks during the reference week, during the pandemic situation, compared to 14% of women. So more women carrying, more time spent on that, and this impact a lot in the educational and labor opportunities. Next, this is an example. This is a very sad example, no? Because we are talking about young people, and this is the situation that 16% of men, but 35% of women are disconnected from educational system and labor market. This situation not only implies a significant disadvantage in the present and future, but also this is a very high stigma, the ninis in Latin America, because the idea that young people in this condition are at risk. The reality is most than half of young women who are neither studying nor employer are in a paid care and domestic work. Many of them are mothers, adolescent pregnancy. This is a big issue in Latin America. So this is other situation. Next. Okay, 5 minutes. So why focus on STEM from a gender perspective? So this is the key idea of, and you know very well, so I will pass for the next slide, please. So this is another data. No, women are underrepresented among STEM graduated in all the countries that we are analyzing. That, for example, the gender education index in the region has clearly evolved, and now is in favor of women. In the last year that we saw 1.30 women, but when we are looking at the STEM, only less than 30% of the total number of graduates, no? With the exception of the 5 countries, British Virgin Islands, Panama, Uruguay, Argentina, and Belize. In the rest, the proportion is not good, no, in general, no. And also we have the trend in percentage has been declining in some countries, no. So the idea of the progression of rights is not so clear, no. For instance, Colombia, Chile, Ecuador, the trend has been declining in the last years, no? Okay, this is only some data. Next. In this slide, we present some indicators that show an apparently more favorable situation for women. However, the data is scarce, different between countries, and does not show specific dynamics on gender equality. But let me say that, first of all, higher enrollment for women than men. This is very, very positive, as I mentioned, and this is a key achievement in the region. Globally, the idea is desegregation, so more women in education, health, arts, humanity, and social sciences, and they are underrepresented in STEM fields. And as I mentioned, the ranges is very low in Latin America, no? And then in ICT fields, as in the last, in 2018, some countries show a low percentage of women graduates, no, in general, no. Okay, there are some information in the next, because, sorry, and Romina, could you say me how much time I have?
Yes, of course. You have 6 minutes left.
6 minutes. Okay. So this is very, very important, because a good news in Latin American Caribbean is we are the region with high percentage of female researchers, 45%. In the last global score, no? But this is not, does this translate into an effective advantage? The reality is women participation in R&D range from 30% in Peru to 61% in Venezuela, and in other countries like El Salvador represent only 37%, no? And this is in Latin America, in 8 countries in Latin America, only 18% of public university have female deans. So, and despite the 55% of leadership posts in public universities are occupied by men. So, when we see at the scientific output, only 27% of patterns include at least one woman. Next, we are analyzing in ECLAC the link between the national women's machinery with the policies linked to the science and tech sector, and specific policies linking STEM and gender equality. And we would like to present in the next slide, please, this change in advancing policies linking gender and STEM. So for instance, in Chile, the link between both sectors produce a gender policy in the last semester, no? So this is a very important advance, the idea of to put educational policies, STEM policies, and gender policies in the same basket, no? Next, this is an assessment that we would like to present. I will choose Chile because we are talking about the situation. For instance, there are public research from the public institutions in Chile, for instance, is the last, and the issue of low female representation among university, only 5 female deans as of 2019. So this is a pleasure to have one of them with us, Dr. Louzano. And basic sciences and technology are the areas with larger gender gaps in enrollment, and women represent only 32% of applicants for the country largest research and development research fund source. No, so and I would like to mention Uruguay because this is this is a key issue for all of us. When they study the barriers and drivers, revealed that 41% of female researchers interrupted their studies because of care responsibilities. And when they review the situation of women and men, the men refers as principal barrier the financial barriers, and women refers care barriers. No, so this is very important to refine policies with a gender approach, because care is a key barriers for young women mainly, no, and challenges and the way forward. So increasing women's participation to reverse their underrepresentation in STEM careers has been the focus of public policies and other initiatives. However, it is necessary to pay more attention to, first, the structural causes of inequalities. We need to deal with the sexual division of labor, violence, unequal burdens of care, and all these situations around the gender inequalities in the region. Second, the transformation of anthrocentric and patriarchal patterns that dominate scientific and technological knowledge are reproduced in STEM educational and work environments. So this is very important to engender these careers, engender these work styles, no? And then is the employment, no? It's not only to achieve, no, but also to have employment, decent employment without segregation, without harassment, and revisit the gender gap. So the way forward is first, policy coordination. We are promoting from ECLA the coordination between educational and science and technology policies, promoting synergies between the different sectors. Second is we need different comprehensive and multidimensional policies, combining different strategies. And this is the last one slide. The idea is, and this is the global proposal from ECLAC, is advance or to take opportunity of this crisis to move with a transformative recovery with gender equality on multiple but related fronts. So transformative economy recovery. Second is invest in the care economy. Third is close the digital divide, the digital gap, and consolidate an inclusive and transformational digital transformation, and move toward a new fiscal pact. And I would like to conclude saying that mainstream the gender perspective is very important, and many universities has now gender plans, gender studies, and masters, and human rights and gender rights approach in there. But mainstreaming is not enough. We need more for that, because the change is very slow. No? So the idea is to put in place decisive affirmative actions, no, in areas of taxation, employment, productive, economic, or social policies. Of course, quota laws, this is a very good example that promote more participation of women in politics, but we need more women in science, more women deans making decisions, more women in STEM. So we need to be more consistent approach, and affirmative actions are part of our human rights framework, and all countries in Latin America and Caribbean are part of the CEDAW, that is the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. No? So this is very important. Mainstreaming is important, but it's not enough. We need to be more progressive actions in order to lead with inequalities and promote a real inclusion of women in all fields of the society and economic pillars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you so much for your three very informative presentations. I think we learned a lot from each one of you. So I'm going to ask each one a question following the order of your presentations. And Romina is sending to me the questions that the audience is asking, and I will ask the questions too. So Dr. Lima, I would like to ask you, I was curious all the challenges your administration has faced in implementing these changes. And I would like if you can tell us a little bit how you have dealt with the resistance to change in incorporating more women, both as faculty as employees. Did you understand? Do you want us to translate you? You are muted.
Cláudia, o microfone tem que abrir. Aí.
Sorry. I don't know if I understood all, but Marcela can translate for me, please?
Yes.
Sure, Professor. Desculpa, professora. A ideia da pergunta é quais foram os principais desafios que a senhora encontrou ao implementar essas políticas de inclusão na sua universidade e como você fez para lidar com os desafios que surgiram no decorrer da implementação dessas políticas, dessas iniciativas.
Okay. It's a big problem. We have situations where you can define only like a rector, a dean. You have a group of persons that you decide the policies, the policies here. And then it's difficult for us human sometimes, because the university in Brazil depends on the financial recourse from the government. In this moment, you don't have money enough to keep the university working. And then this policy for human, I think that we start now work with this policy, but this structural proposal, I don't know if I can to do in periods, in short periods, because I don't have money, but I think that is necessary to put these demands to the community, UFOP community, to decide what to do with the policies. In relation, my situation, like Adim, is difficult as well, because we have in Brazil several cultural problems with female and males, between males and females. And in my university, I'm first dean, and then I have support something like it's not acceptable, but it's not clear for all. But sometimes I feel no so good due to problems that I don't have solutions, because I'm woman, and then it's hard. I think that we have to brave when we when you candidate this position, né? And then it's difficult, it's not easy. And it's not easy as well, determine this policy in the community. I then that Brazil and the other countries in Latin America knows about the difficulty for us women to work in high like women leaders. Is difficult for us, but I think that I want to open this space for the other females, because I think that we women have to think that it's possible. If you want, you get this position, the leader position. And then it's difficult, but it is possible. I think that this, I don't know if my answer was enough to understand me.
Yes, thank you so much. I think you answered what I asked you to. Thank you. So, Paula, I want to ask you, because I think the most interesting part of your talk for me was at the very end, where you said that they created the policies, but they never took into consideration gender. You know, there is a tendency among policymakers in Latin America to they still use the neutral masculine maestro in relation to a profession that is feminized. So I just wanted to ask you, I'm sure you have thought about this. So what do you think would have changed in the policy if they had thought about gender since the beginning? You know, given that even Mexico was trying to implement a very similar policy under the new president that interrupted that, the one in Chile. So I have read a lot about it. But, you know, this thing of not considering gender since the beginning is just something that in our policymakers, that it's just incredible to me that this still happens today. But so that's my first question.
Yeah, I think if this policy is part of a bigger movement that became, like, since democracy in Chile, I would say from the beginning of the 90s, when you had elections and you had a center-left government that decided to put teachers at the center. So if you think that this, what I'm just saying, and the law was approved fully in this whole, taking into consideration this whole aspect that I described in 2016. So it's pretty much 90s and 2000 type of policy where gender was not so much in the agenda. I think Anna talked about how recent some of those policies, like not only focus on gender studies, but thinking about gender in the broader sense of the sense of opportunities is fairly new. And if you think about Chile, the feminist movement that was very strong in the country started in 2017, unfortunately. So the law had already, and I think it changes a lot the way people view things in all areas of the policy, and especially in education. And I think if this legislation would be discussed today, it would have taken into consideration those different opportunities that both Cláudia and Anna talked about, how hard it is for women to access to some, to higher education, to like a more rigorous curriculum, a full-time higher education versus after night shifts, night classes, which it's very much a characteristic of this training in Latin America, because sometimes either women have to work at home or work outside home to provide. So I think would have more incentives. We would have understood that not only the women need not to pay to study, but maybe they would need more support. As we are realizing, I would say in research, there's one question, I don't know if I could answer to now the question that someone sent about publication. Regina, can I go ahead and answer that? They ask about how is publication. I would say in terms of research and the way the university that I work has changed since the gender movement or the feminist movement in Chile has a lot to do in looking at making more equitable or the distribution of opportunities in a way. For example, we had only a regular research fund that was given by the university to all researchers. You have like everybody apply, and some people would get it and not, and gender was not an issue in this decision. Because now they acknowledge that there is a gender bias. If you just leave the decision blind, they decided to have two funds, one just for women and one for women and men, which is blind, right? So this would not have happened if we didn't have this push toward equality. Also, the deans within the university used to have much more male deans. We are 10 within the university, and they decided they should have an equilibrium. So the last deans that were higher were all women. This was also a decision. And also in terms of salary, they realized that men and women in the same position were receiving different payments, different salaries, and they decide to equalize. Things that are very obvious, but if you don't pay attention, like Anna said, if you don't really look at them, you take it for granted that that's how it is. Oh, you were getting more money because you were more productive. You were better than this other person who happens to be a woman, but that's clearly not the case. And so what also in terms of publication, the question is what type of publications your university tends to ask for the professors. I would say Chile looks a lot at the US, right? Different from Brazil, where you have much more like within the country kind of categories of or journals and things like that. It's much a bigger country. So the type of publication that people are asked to do in Chile are very similar that type of publication people are asked to do in the US. Web of Science publications, higher impact factor, because this type of publication influence the amount of money the university receives from the government, and also the possibility that you get a higher accreditation for your university or for your program, for doctoral programs, for example. So making even harder for women to compete in this specific market of publications which are not Chilean, it's usually not in Spanish, and takes a lot of time for you to prepare a publication like that to get published. So yeah, what we are trying to do is to support women different from men by having given money for translation, revision of the articles, and also to have research assistants, because with this time, they can allocate time to their other labor that they have to do at home and have like a assistant doing part of the job. So the difference in the amount of help that we give today for women researchers is very different, because we are acknowledging something that was obvious that we already knew as a woman, but that we are making more visible. And I think this is due to the feminist movement that was very strong in the country. But yeah, the person who asked the question is someone who works in the publishing business in the US. I think I would give incentives to help women publish versus open the space for them. It's not enough. You need, like Anna said, affirmative action. So help before and not after. That's it.
Thank you very much, Paola. I want to ask Romina to send you, we just published an article about gender in the National University of Mexico. And it's very interesting to see very much the same patterns of women, mostly in the teaching position, men in the leadership position and research positions. We will have another conversation because I think we have a lot of interest in common. I would like to ask a question to Ana Gusmas. I think you gave us a very good overview of what is happening in terms of the work of ECLAC in Latin America. And I was curious to know if you, for example, you talk about the vocational and technical institutes, is any way that ECLAC is helping the government to follow the policies and the result of the policies? So if things become successful, it can be shared around the region? Or what exactly is the goal of the work that you're doing?
Yes, no, thank you, Regina, for the question. And let me say that in the previous war in Mexico, we support the UNAM, the National University, in develop the gender mainstreaming policy and He4C campaign that was a driver in order to promote the elimination of sexual violence across the university. That is a big issue. Regarding the work in ECLAC, we produce this kind of regular data in order to follow the commitment of countries and the results of countries in all those areas, no? And also we provide technical assistance to the countries, for instance, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Chile also, in the last years, in order to work together with the national women's machineries, with the educational sector, and STEM and commerce sector, no? Because the idea is that we need a policy coordination across those sectors. And traditionally, the women's machineries at the country, the ministers or institutes at the countries were not focused on those areas, no? So I think parity, educational parity was a key issue at the 90s. And now the idea of that is the second revisit of this policy. And on the other hand, we convene as ECLAT the regional conference on women for Latin America and Caribbean for the last 40 years. We have this conference that is an opportunity for a constructive dialogue between countries, between governments, between feminist and women's movement across the region, international organization. This is very important because in this region, the regional agenda that is part of those conferences, and the last one was in Santiago in a very complex moment, but with a very important commitment in order to have counter-cyclical policies in order to protect social protection and women's rights in this so difficult moment. So the idea in those conferences is move the agenda, and for instance, many of the issues that we are talking here, for instance, parity, or care economy, or how to promote the women's autonomy, or the structural, the framework about the structural challenges are part of this discussion. So we are a mix in promote research in these areas, technical assistance to the countries, and multilateral agreement in order to move forward and quickly accelerate we talk about the substantive gender equality, because the issue in our region is gender equality is part of all our constitutions. So formal equality is very, and in fact, this region is very advanced in regulatory laws and all of that. But the issue, and Paula said, at the end, we are at the same level, but we have gender gap. So we need to see better evidence and explore by qualitative and quantitative methods the barriers and challenges that have the women and men in the region in order to follow their trajectories, no, educational and work trajectories, no. So this is a general idea of what we are doing now. Thank you, Regina.
Well, thank you so much to the three of you. Unfortunately, we just run out of time for the time we had for the panel. I hope that we continue in communication, and I think that we've some way that we can continue this panel in another moment. But I want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your experience, and thank you to Romina for all the organization.
Thank you, Regina, and thank you to the panelists. We look forward to meeting you again, as Regina was saying. And this is it for today. For all those who stayed with us, thank you so much, and for all those who attended. And please join us tomorrow if you're interested at the same time for the topic of Latin American higher education, a space for women's participation, equity, and social reaffirmation. Thank you so much.